Hey everybody, this is Pete Toll, aka PT Sports 84. I just want to make a video. I'd made a video probably about a week ago covering this topic, but realized that my audio on my mic was not working the entire time I recorded the video, so I had to delete it, take it down, and I didn't have time to re-record a video. So wanted to dive in specifically to the NBA 2K21 next gen player tendencies and just kind of give some feedback and clear up a little bit of misconceptions that some people have in regards to the tendencies and things like that. I want to use the official 2K Sports roster to kind of highlight some of those things. So as you see, I'm in the roster. I go to the tendencies here, and I'm going to cover different areas for the tendencies and kind of show you what's important. So the first thing is the non-gameplay related tendencies. So these are strictly only for the sim stats, like my NBA, numbers and things like that. These do not affect the gameplay portion of NBA 2K21 on next gen, or actually on current gen for that matter. And that is this tendency here, which is the shot tendency. Then we have shot close, shot under the basket, shot mid-range, and then we have shot three. Those are only sim-based tendencies. You still want to edit those correctly based on, calculated formulas as well as using real-life stats in order to, get a proper sim stat-based, calculation and just for everything to kind of come out the best it can on that side of things, because you want the standings to be correct. You want player league leaders in different categories to be as correct as possible. So editing those categories helps in that area. Next, we have the spot up mid, off screen mid, spot up three, and off screen three, which are these here. So you have the spot up three, the off screen three, the spot up mid, and the off screen mid. These are gameplay tendencies. These directly affect the gameplay experience. And, with these, it's easy to kind of look up and see stat-based wise on NBA.com. You can search the stats page and find the info you need to edit these. I'll dive into kind of what I use as a scale a little bit and kind of give you a little bit of feedback on a couple of things. So, in regards to the spot up mid, my opinion is that no guard, point guard, shooting guard, and even most of the wings, they all should not have the spot up mid tendency. It should be at a 0, because we're not in the NBA era like we were in the early 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, 60s, and even the 50s, where guys spotted up from the mid-range and looked to shoot from there when they were wing players and guards. Now it's all perimeter-based, beyond the three-point line to get better spacing. Now, with the power forwards and the centers, you can, play around with the numbers and get a little bit better accuracy by lowering some of these for some of the stretch bigs that, do not shoot from the mid-range really at all, which a guy like Mike Scott, for example, here in the Sixers, he would not spot up in the mid-range territory. He would spot up behind the three-point line, and either he's going to shoot the three, obviously, on a wide-open catch, or he's going to pass it in or pass it around to someone else, whether it's Embiid in the mid-post or, pass it around for a better shot. He's not looking to stand, 15 feet from the basket to catch the ball and shoot it. Now, personally, what I do With the off screen, I kind of leave these alone. If a guy is not, like, based on the stats from maybe NBA.com, if he's a guy that does not shoot very many shots from the mid-range, then I lower these as well. For the bigs, oftentimes I lower these all the way down. For guys that are like more of a, rim runner big, or, pick and roll big, like a Paul Reed would not shoot off-screen mid, so his would be very low, pretty much close to zero. Whereas a guy like Tobias Harris could come off a screen in the mid-range and shoot, so I kind of leave him at default, maybe adjust slightly. Now, that takes me to the spot up 3 tendency. Spot up 3 tendency, if a big does not shoot them, they should have a 0 in this category. Embiid being an 85 in this category is absolutely crazy to me, because if you looked at his stats this year, he's shooting in the mid-range area. He's not even really posting down low and banging guys down low. He catches the ball in the mid-range area and faces up, and either shoots from that range or drives in, spins off, and kind of does a little, like a little floating hook in the lane if he, has the chance. The thing you want to look at with the spot up 3 tendency is if you have, and also with the off screen, if you have a ball handler, such as like, let's look at like a guy like a James Harden, because he's at the 2 guard position. He's playing the point this year, but you can just say, Irving's the 2, Harden's the 1, vice versa, whatever, however you want to look at it. He's got a 99 in both categories. That's or a 99 in, shot 3, which is the computer simulated stat area. That should be lowered because he's not shooting as many threes, and with the 99-3, he's never going to look to drive to the basket. But with the 99 spot up 3, this does affect gameplay. So does the 60 off screen. What happens, because Harden is a ball handler and he has the play initiator option checked to yes, they have to have a maximum in these categories. The threshold for 2K21 next gen was never adjusted from 2K21 and current gen, despite there being differences in the overall, I'm going to say coding, or however you want to, the AI, how they read situations and things like that. The 99 spot up is just not going to work. It should be a maximum of 75 for any ball handlers, and the off screen has to be a 50 for any kind of ball handler. Now, that also goes in line with the step back tendencies. 75 should be your maximum for the step back, at the absolute maximum. Here, James Harden's a 60, so he's okay, but you also have to realize anything below a 40 will not trigger a step back very often. So a 60 could potentially be, for Harden, about a 70. You want to adjust, these categories based off of stats. These are important as well. The contested shots, the step backs, those are all very important tendencies to have in order to get, proper gameplay. These have to be edited across the board for every single player. And diving into a little bit with the pull-up tendencies, notice that these aren't really edited. You have a few that are computer-generated, never really touched, I guess you could say, and then these low numbers. The low numbers here means they're never going to perform these moves. What I do is I go to NBA.com, I pull each team's stats page that has the pull-up tendencies. They have, because the guy's only going to pull up from mid-range, the mid-range area, or the three-point area based on these 2 categories, and they break it down that way in on the NBA.com stats page. What you could do is take that percentage, times it by 2, and then you have what your number should be in here, and it's actually really good as far as being replicated in 2K21. You get a good balance. If you balance these mid-range tendencies with the step-back tendencies correct, the 3-point tendencies correct, and then what I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is the drive tendencies, all of those fixed across the board all work, seamlessly well together if they're all edited properly on a correct scale. Now, I don't personally, you don't want to go over 75 in this category, and 75 is extremely high. If you have it as a 75 for a pull-up, that means you better have your other categories at a 75 as well, because otherwise you're going to have a lot of pull-ups. Now, you get somebody like a Chris Paul that pulls up in the mid-range for a shot, I would probably max him at, 70, 75, depending on, where he is, based on the stats. Now, this is the default roster. I had worked previously on an older roster around the trade deadline that I completed for testing. I released that so people could kind of play with it and see, what they liked, what they didn't. I personally did not like a few things that I had adjusted scales-wise, and that's why I had to go back in and retest everything, because what I did was originally I put everything that I had notes-wise for the past 4 years from current gen into next gen, thinking, things will translate pretty easy. Now, some things did translate exactly the same, but a few categories like this pull-up category, the spot-up 3 category, the drives category, the ISO category, a couple of those categories did not translate the same. The touch tendencies don't translate the same. The scales are a little bit different, and just a little bit of difference could throw off a lot gameplay-wise. Nino Samuel, a.k.a. Dazar, said it best many times. You can fix one thing and it could break many other things, and you just gotta find a proper balance that works for you as a gamer. I'm going to also say the disclaimer that I just recommend these, and these are this is my feedback and some of my notes. I did have extensive testing, 2K17, 18, and 19, tendencies-wise, and figure out a lot after I was able to work on the tendencies, helping out. And I found out a lot more info that was crucial after the fact, later on my own testing about 6 months after that, that proved more vital than anything I did in the kind of official capacity, I guess you could say, in a way. And the reason for that is I was able to sit down myself with a retail copy, once everything was finished, and basically just test everything from the ground up, from a 0 scale. What does 0 do? What does a 10 do? What does a 20 do? What does a 30 do? And so on. And kind of work on each scale, and I figured it out for most categories. Now, I had to redo that for next gen, and there was a little bit of a difference that definitely makes gameplay quite different. I like the gameplay on next gen better, minus the pick and roll defense, which everybody's complained about. That's just going to be there. Nothing we could do about it until next year when it's fixed a little bit more. But all right, I got off on a tangent. I'm going to get back to it. A couple other tendencies that I think are very important. The floater tendency. A guy like Bruce Brown here has a 35 tendency in a floater. But then you go over here, his layup's a 5, spin layups a 35. Basically, these all are based on strength of what they're going to do. Majority of the time, he's going to drive and dunk because his driving dunk is a 70, whereas he mainly shoots floaters in the lane. So this essentially maxes out at a 75. Now, when you max this out at a 75, you can lower this down, this category down as well, to, based on his stats. Now, one thing to note that 2K did not change officially this year, and I noticed it actually last year, the dunk tendencies, which is the standing dunk, driving dunk, and flashy dunk. These 3 are all scaled incorrectly currently. Now, 0 means there's a 0% tendency or a chance that this tendency will come into play. A 50 means there was a 50% chance that they would perform a driving dunk, standing dunk, or a flashy dunk. And an 80 is a 100% chance that they're going to dunk, or, whatever, the AI is going to dunk in that situation. If you're the user, you have control over it anyway. I've noticed that the scale is, for some of the lower players, it's like a 40, and it shouldn't be. 0 means 0, 50 means 50, and 80 means 100. And that goes for these here. Another one that's very, very important if you want to have players that are highlight dunkers, that cut to the rim, alley-oop guys, things like that, you want to raise the alley-oop tendency. Now, I didn't notice the difference between 75 and 99 for this category. I personally put the scale at 80 to go with these dunk tendencies. So an 80% or an 80 tendency means they have a 100% chance of catching a lob if a play is designed for that. Now, what that means is you have to have somebody that's high in an alley-oop tendency, and then go over to the point guard spot, and you have to look at the where is it? It is further down. Here we go. Alley-oop pass tendency. You have to have somebody with a high alley-oop pass tendency. So Kyrie Irving would throw that alley-oop, whereas somebody like Spencer Dinwiddie really would never throw it. These have to be adjusted for all point guards, all passing wings, and even passing bigs like a Jokic. You have to have the scale 75. Kyrie Irving is right there with, a top tier guy. I personally didn't see a difference between 75 and 99 in the pass tendency, for the alley-oop pass tendency. I have guys at a 99, like a Facu Campazzo would be a 99 because that's what he does. He's a pass first guard. That's just an example there. I want to go back to what I was talking about here earlier with the drive tendencies. Now, these drive tendencies don't work hand in hand with the three-point tendencies, the spot up three tendency. These could be, they're within themselves. But you want to base it off of how often a guy drives. You could look at those stats and kind of come up with your own formula. You do not want to go over 75 for the maximum in these categories. The drive tendency here means that it's basically once a guy drives to the rim, how often he's going to keep driving to get to the actual rim itself. The spot-up drive and the off-screen drive are how often they're going to catch it. Like, say they catch it at the three-point line, they're going to catch it and drive, and then they're going to, come off a screen and drive. You just want to make sure that you're scaling these in an appropriate manner because they can be very overpowering compared to the three-point tendency and the mid-range tendency. So you kind of want to scale those. They're not direct hand-in-hand, like I said, but you want to have it, kind of close proximity of each other. So say you have Kyrie Irving at a, 65 drive, maybe give him a 45 in a three-point tendency. You always want to have a 20-point gap in between anything you do as far as the things that kind of work slightly hand-in-hand or that might work off each other. That way it gives the computer enough difference to know, hey, we need to do this versus this in a category. If it's like 5, like a difference of 5, basically, an 80 and an 85, the AI is going to read that not much differently. And so it's going to kind of get scrambled and you're not going to get quality results. Now, one thing to also note when it comes to the tendencies, where is it? It is this way. One thing I will say, feedback-wise, I wish 2K would clean up the quick edit menu to get these tendencies a little bit better. Like the drive tendencies could have been over with the spot-up tendencies, so you don't have to go as far with that. Oh, the other one I wanted to highlight is the attack strong on drive, which is the finish tendency versus the dish to open man tendency. These have to be minimum 20 apart from each other. So 45 and 65 here means that mostly Mike James is going to drive and he's going to look to dish to an open man. If you want to see more players driving and dishing to open shooters in the corner, you need this tendency, the dish tendency, to be higher than this. You can even go, like a 30 gap. I would not do this for Kyrie personally. I'm just using this as an example. But this 30 here is quite a big difference, which means they're mostly going to try to drive and dish, the most they can to players, which you're going to get open play with wide open shooters and things like that. Actually, let's go to like a Trey Young, for example. Trey Young, by default, has a 75 finish and an 85 dish to open man. That means he could pass, he could finish. He's going to look to finish a lot more. And because his go-to move, which is a floater, is at a 40, he's never going to perform that move. It's always going to be a driving layup here. So what I always do with Trey is I lower that down, these all down to a 40 or, 30 here, hop step at a 40. And then I always put the floater, like I said earlier, the floater is not scaled on a 75 max scale. It could go up to 99. I put it personally at an 80. So that way, he still gets a mix of layups and things like that in there. But you could put it at a 99 if you want to see Trey shoot more of the floaters. But when you do that, you also need to look at his, these are all over the place, his driving tendency. So you want to up his driving tendency a little bit more because he's not shooting as many threes despite his three-point spot-up tendency being a 99. That means every time he catches the ball, it's probably going up to be a shot. So you want to lower this down. I personally lower it down to 45 because I can't remember exactly what his numbers are. I don't have it right in front of me right this second. But he's way down on shooting threes this year versus driving and getting fouled or driving and shooting a floater. Now, if you do the drive tendencies there, you also have to go over, like I said, to the finish versus attack. I drop him down here to the finish to a 45 and keep him at 85 because he is a guy that passes quite a bit in the lane. But at a 45, he's still going to finish quite a bit. That's something to look out for. You always want to make sure this category is changed, as much as you can, as accurately as you can. You can find those stats on NBA.com as well, and kind of tailor it that way. I always tailor guys. I don't go stat for stat because you cannot, one thing to note, you cannot take real NBA stats and directly apply them as they are written into NBA 2K21. You have to have a scale to work off of, and that takes testing, time, effort, situational testing. Another thing to note, if you want guys to throw flashy passes and things like that, 75 to me, is the max I'd go because I don't want to see crazy passes all over the place. You could go to 99 if that's your preference, but I personally don't. And then notice here, Trey Young's got a 10 for an alley-oop pass. That means guys like John Collins, Clint Capella, Okongwu, they're not going to catch alley-oops at all. You have to jump this up to, with Trey Young being as high as he is with assist, I throw him up to a 99. You could go an 80 if you wanted. I go 99 to make sure he throws it. The other category I want to bring up, which is pretty big one, is the roll versus pop tendency. A lot of people get this confused. A lot of people think that the 0 means that they are going to roll to the rim. Because you would think roll versus pop, roll being first means that the 0 would indicate the roll. That's not true. The smaller the number, which means 0, means they're going to pop. Versus, that means they're not going to look to cut to the basket, roll to the basket, however you want to word it. The higher they are, like a Clint Capella, they're going to roll to the basket. Another one is transition spot up versus cut. The higher the tendency, the higher chance they're going to, basically be out on the wing, the 3-point line, to look as a spot up shooter to shoot the 3 ball on a fast break transition bucket. The lower they are, which means they're going to cut directly to the basket. And you can get a dunk or a alley-oop, a finish, whatever you want. The other thing is 2K, I think, could improve on their area of the ISO tendencies. Everybody in the game, it seems like, for the most part, probably 85% of the players in the game have ISO tendencies. So that means if a play breaks down based on the play discipline value here, that means that is lower down. Like, say for a Lou Williams, he's a 20 here, and he's got these ISO tendencies. That means that if the play breaks down and Lou Williams is the ball handler, that means the ISO tendencies are going in effect. Now, for Lou Williams, that's valid because that's what he's going to do. But that's not necessarily true. Let's find somebody. See if we can find somebody here. Like a Devontae Graham, for example. His play discipline's at a 15. Devontae Graham mostly looks to shoot 3-pointers. He's not an ISO guy, even though his ISO tendencies aren't that high. He's still not really an ISO guy, so that play discipline's got to be pushed up. The higher the value, the higher that they're going to basically follow the plays that are being called. The lower the value, that means that basically they're going to break off the play and kind of create their own scoring opportunity for themselves. That goes with the ISO tendencies here. I personally think that the ISO tendencies you can't put at a 99. Like, I think this was just thrown in as a computer generated stat, a 99 in here for like a Grant Riller. You could do 99 for a lot of the players, but I just think that a better focus has to be made on who gets a 99 and follows plays and doesn't really ISO or look to branch off of plays versus who does. I think the lowest you should go in this category is a 25. I think it should be 25 to 99. I don't think anybody should be lower than that, personally, but I got good results out of it because I didn't see a lot of players, even like a James Harden, branching off of the play. If he had a 25 in this category, he's still going to branch off the play, but he'll still look to drive and kick. Putting him down to a 0 was always a dribble step back every time. So that value there was a little bit different. And what worked for me, that's just what I tested and saw. Another one that I wanted to focus on. Another thing to note, actually, before I get into the post-up category. With the post-ups, most of the guards, like Grant Riller here, this was just computer generated. He should not have values in the post-up. He doesn't post up. Those need to be cleaned up across the board. But for guys that do post up, like let's go back to a Joel Embiid. Embiid, yes, is a post-up guy. But what happens with the post-up tendencies is a lot of guys think, oh, well, post-up tendencies, I'm going to put up a guy like Embiid who posts up all the time at a 90, or, Howard here for a 99. That's inaccurate. They should not be that high. Number one. Number two, and you can look up that data, how often they post up. It's easy to look up. bballindex.com does a great job of breaking down every player, the percentage they've touched the ball in the post. Frequency is a little bit easier to me to read than the NBA.com stats who have a minimum threshold, whereas B-Ball Index does not have a minimum threshold. So you could have one attempt and it shows kind of what they've done. But you got to break it down by post player. So a back down big that never faces up, obviously you want the post aggressive and the back down to be high values. Now, the highest value that these two categories, back down and aggressive back down, should have is a 50. That's your max. That means these here are too high. They're basically above the category. The max should be 50 in these two categories. This is based off the stats, so you can put it however you want to put that, because that's just going to be how often they post up, like get in the post up motion, or the play is called for them if they have the proper play type. Now the face up category, this has to be higher than the back down. So actually for Embiid this year, I've lowered him down to a 35 back down, and I do a 75 face up because he's facing up in the mid range. Sometimes it's a pump fake, sometimes it's a mid range shot altogether, and that goes for guys. You just have to figure out who the face up guys are: Embiid, Jokic, Anthony Davis. Who else? A guy like Zion faces up. He doesn't really shoot, but he faces up and drives. So you just have to make sure that the face-up category is there in a higher value than that, back down in the aggressive back down category. Now, for other tendencies like post drive, drop step, hop step, the maximum should be a 25. And then looking at hooks, fadeaways, shimmy shots, hop shots, step backs, and the up and under should go no higher than 20. And they all should value out, like if you want one category higher than the other, like I'm trying to think of what a good example. Like Howard wouldn't shoot that many up and unders. You could put him at a 5 compared to, say, he might take more of a hook shot. So you would have that at a 20. So then there's more of a chance that he would take that particular shot more than he would take anything else. But then you'd have to lower anything he doesn't take down to 5 or below, preferably 0 if he doesn't take it at all. Now, for guys like a Zion, for example, he's actually a perfect example, because he faces up and then he drives to the basket. So what you want to do with a guy like Zion is have that face-up tendency. You want to have that face-up tendency high. And you can go all the way up to 100 if you wanted for that face-up tendency. The thing about the face-up tendency is even at 100, you're going to get about 65% that he's going to shoot in that, or shoot that face-up shot. It's not going to be a 99 equals 100% chance. It's going to be about 65, maybe a slightly higher than that, just based on what I've tested. Now, with a guy like Zion or an Embiid or a Jokic or a Tim Duncan, guys in the mid-range, you want to make sure, you're calculating these stats across the board accordingly. So if a guy's not really fading away from the post or shooting a hook shot, you need to lower that down and increase the other categories. One other thing to note in regard to post players in the mid-range, this applies only for shooters in the mid-range. Like let's say a Jokic in the mid-range. You need to go over to the spot-up mid-range tendency that we talked about earlier, that plays a big part in the gameplay tendencies, and that needs to be rated between 50 and 75, only for the shooting bigs from the mid-range post-up position. So like an Embiid, a Jokic, a Tim Duncan, like those kind of guys, even Christian Wood, like those kind of guys that are going to shoot in the mid-range. Anthony Davis, of course. The spot up mid needs to be between 50 and 75. The contested shot, vitally important in the mid-range, needs to be between a 40 and a 60 in this category for that, for them to be able to shoot, because the defense is going to collapse on them. They're still going to want to shoot over them. And lastly is the triple threat shot tendency. So this has to be between a 50 and a 95 in this category for them to shoot. Notice here that Jokic is a 0 by default. That means he's never going to shoot the ball at a mid-range level as far as, he does at like a 45-degree angle in the real NBA. You have a better chance if you put him, I can't remember what I had him at in my roster, but I'm going to say 65 is where you would want to put him. Maybe even actually higher. You don't want to put him too high because you still want somebody like Jokic to be able to pass out of the the mid-range area. So I would say 65 or 70 should be enough in that category. So going back to a guy like James Harden, real quick, if you have a primary ball handler, a guy that, basically initiates the offense or handles the ball a lot, and if you put him in a 99 tendency in the 3-point categories, like I said, the spot up 3 or the off-screen 3, that means that more than 75% of the time in pick and roll situations, they're either going to do like Harden does with the step back, or they're going to look to shoot the ball. You want to lower that down, like I said earlier, and have it at a maximum off-screen 3 of a 50, a step-back 3 of a 75 max, and a spot-up 3 max 75. So that way, they're still going to get assists, they're still going to drive, but he's still going to be able to shoot the 3 if he needs to. Otherwise, you get that crazy, weird sideways throwing 3 that is only on next gen. That guys do, especially like Trey Young. I've seen a lot because he's got a 99 in the spot up 3. That happens. You just gotta work accordingly based on those scales. Another one I wanted to look at real quick is, let's go into the quick edit menu. Here we go. Want to go into the touch tendencies. The scale for next gen is a maximum 95, and that's for guys based on usage rate. Say like a Luka, which had over like 33%, maybe a little higher usage rate, he can get a 95. But you got to keep in mind, as you scale them, you need to scale the rest of the team accordingly. So a guy that might not shoot that often, like a Reggie Perry, could be down to say a 40 or a 45. Or Allies Johnson, 45, but then you need a Durant at like a 95, and a guy like a Harden, who you would say 95, I would actually put him at an 85. I would have Durant at a 90, and then Irving at a 90, and that way there's a proper balance across the board of, okay, Durant's going to get a good look, Harden's still going to facilitate, but still have a nice number of shots, and then Kyrie Irving's still going to get his shots. You just have to basically link it accordingly based on the usage rate and just how things shake out per team, and you just have to balance it for the scale and the team specifically. Next thing I want to point out when you're editing a roster is you have to look at the overalls and how they work in the rotation screen. Basically the overall, the higher the overall, the more they're going to make it into the rotation and kind of where they are in the rotation based on starting, a key role player, a reserve, things like that. You can play with the modification of that. If a guy is, say, like a DeAndre Jordan is higher maybe than a Blake Griffin, but Blake Griffin starts, you can go here to the non-starter, put that on for a specific player, and it bumps them down in the rotation. Another thing to note in this category is the play initiator. This only needs to be on for guys that are in the pick and roll or primary ball handlers, things like that. Guys like Landry Shamet, I take it off because I don't want him initiating the offense. I want him being able to come off the screens, things like that. And I keep it on for, other guys as well. Then looking at play types. We talked about earlier the alley-oop tendencies, the cut tendency, things like that. If you have a cut play, you need to have that, assigned to a player and vice versa. What I've seen a lot this year in 2K21 for the next gen is you'll have plays not assigned. Like there's 2 play cutter plays for the Nets in here. And let's see if anybody has cutter. Okay, so Joe Harris has cutter as his 3rd play priority, so he'll still cut to the basket based on that. But you want to go into the playbook, and you want to make sure that the cutter play is run for that specific player that you're looking for, that it's assigned to for each team. Now, what I found interesting was that the Pelicans have 0 3-point plays in their playbook, 0 cutter plays in their playbook, despite Zion cutting to the basket or Jackson Hayes cutting for an alley-oop layup. And you can look at Zion having play priority 2 being a cutter. Well, there's no cutter plays, so he's never going to get that play type. It is never going to be realistically called for the team. Same for Jackson Hayes, as I talked about. No cutter plays. Lonzo Ball has a 3-point play assigned, but there's no play type assigned, but there's no 3-point play in the playbook. So that's never going to happen. That's where 2K has to get better. You have to know what playbooks have what plays in them, make sure they're detailed, then go to the play types and fix every player's play types. Another issue that I think I could give constructive feedback on is the play initiator play type or play option or whatever you want to call it. These aren't uniformed across the board to take advantage of who does what. James Nunnally is not a ball handler, so James Nunnally should have that turned off, but it's on by default. A guy like, let's see, find a team where we can get somebody that has it assigned that shouldn't have it. Let's see if we have, not there. I know, like, previously, like Justin Patton that was in the G League that played for the Rockets, he has it assigned. There's a couple bigs that have it assigned that shouldn't, a couple wings that have it assigned that shouldn't. You just got to make sure you adjust that so that way guys aren't dribbling the ball up the court who shouldn't be. The other thing that I've noticed is here under the coaching menu, 2 things. One, Minnesota Timberwolves coach Chris Finch has the Raptors playbook because he was an assistant with the Raptors. That means that the players on the team will not run the proper plays of the Timberwolves. They're going to run the Raptors playbook, which is going to make all the plays inaccurate. Whether it's Karl Anthony Towns or Anthony Edwards, all of those are going to run incorrect plays. You have to switch him over to the Timberwolves. Now, second coach that has this error is Nate McMillan with the Hawks because he was a Pacers head coach last year. They never updated his playbooks, so he should have the Hawks playbook, so they run the Hawks plays. The play types are right once you edit them and things like that. Also, these points of emphasis categories could be edited based on NBA stats as well, based on team stats. These are effective in sim stats only to get better sim stats across the board. So you can adjust those, however you want to adjust those. The player grades affect, coach grades affect simulation stats as well. So you need to adjust based on where the teams are as far as, offensive rating, defensive rating, things like that. you can base it off of that. I also adjust the assistants whenever I do the coaches, so that way it's uniform across the board. But hopefully this video was helpful to you, because I think that a lot of people were a little bit confused about some of the tendencies, a couple other things this year. It is a little bit different in Next Gen. I'm actually working on a roster. I've got all my scales kind of put together, so I'm working on a roster myself that should be out in the next week and a half or so, that will have edited tendencies and things like that. I could show you. Let's see. Actually, I'll wait to show because I don't want to spoil anything. But basically what I've done is I've completed the historic teams. I've added all the missing players correctly based on playoff roster, end of the season rosters for every team. And I've also went in and fixed all of the speed ratings for players. The speed, the ball handling, speed with ball handling, speed and acceleration, the strength ratings, the stamina ratings, and the intangible ratings based on scale. I actually use John Markish's The Real 2K Insiders scale for intangibles. So basically it's like superstars or like Hall of Famers are 99, all-stars are 90, rotation players are 80, or starters are 80, and key rotation players are 70, out of the rotations are 60 excuse me. And then like G League guys are 50. I think I remember that scale correctly. Sorry, John, if I botched that at all, but basically that's what I do. And then I base the speed and acceleration on real life, because you'll see that there's some players that like are just way off. Like some of the guards are like extremely high versus like let's see, for example, you see you have Sam Merrill, who's a point guard shooting guard at a 62 speed and acceleration. That's ridiculous. When you have a guy like Mamadi Diakite at an 80 and an 83, like that's got to be better across the board. That's a category that is not automatically changed on the spreadsheet each week, for 2K, so they have to go in and manually change that. That's something they have to improve on next year, because speed of the players in the game is something that's been a crippling effect of 2K for a long time, and hopefully they fix it moving forward. But don't want to dive into that too much. But hope these feedback and notes helped anybody that was wondering about tendencies and what they do and what to change versus what not to change. And hope you enjoy the video, and I will see you on the next one.